Hey, buddy, you okay?
It's no secret that by the end of 1997, the Sega Saturn was in rough shape. The PlayStation and Nintendo 64 had firmly outclassed it, and the disastrous development and cancellation of Sonic X-treme meant that 3 years into the console's lifespan, it still didn't have a major title starring Sega's flagship character. Despite a strong and loyal user base in Japan, the Saturn had little hope of replicating the success Sega saw in the fourth generation, especially not without Sonic. With Sonic X-treme scrapped and Burning Rangers occupying Sonic Team's attention, Sega had a hedgehog-shaped hole in their holiday release calendar. So they once again turned to Traveler's Tales, this time asking them to create a brand new Sonic game, one that would be, finally, full-blown, honest-to-God 3D. Traveler's Tales had already been working on a 3D game engine for the Saturn, originally developed for a Formula 1 racing title meant to rival Psygnosis' Formula 1 on the PlayStation. But when licensing deals fell through, Sega pivoted, now requesting that engine would be used to make the next Sonic game, and that game needed to be finished in just 9 months. The result was Sonic R, the third Sonic racing game and the first released on a major console. Unlike the Sonic Drift titles on Game Gear, though, this time the characters were racing on foot. No vehicles this time, mostly, and unlike Sonic 3D Blast, there was no isometric trickery. For the first time in the franchise, characters and environments were rendered in full 3D. And, well, it says something about the state of Sonic on the Saturn that his first 3D title was a spin-off racing game. Funny or tragic? Honestly, a little bit of both. There are 9 total racers, technically 10 if you count Super Sonic, but you only start with the main 4, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Each has unique stats like top speed, acceleration, and handling. Sonic's the fastest, Tails has the best acceleration, Knuckles is a reliable all-rounder, and Amy is just here to have fun. They also come with special abilities to help them stand out. Sonic gets a double jump, Tails can fly for short bursts, Knuckles can glide, and Amy, one of 2 racers who does use a vehicle, can use a turbo boost. Eggman's Eggmobile fires homing missiles and, like Amy's car, hovers over water. Useful since most characters will just sink like rocks. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles all share the spin dash, but it can only be used from a complete standstill, making it useful mostly at the starting line. Beyond the initial 4, the rest of the cast is unlocked through gameplay. Beat every course in first place and you'll unlock Dr. Eggman. The other 4 secret characters are earned by collecting 5 hidden Sonic tokens per course, finishing at least 3rd, and then winning a one-on-one race against them. Metal Sonic and Egg Robo are welcome returning faces. Metal Sonic is a speedier version of Sonic with twitchier steering and no spin dash or double jump, but he can hydroplane over water. Egg Robo's basically a smoother, faster Eggman, but he still can't jump, and unlike Eggman, he can't hover over water. The 2 remaining secret characters are newcomers. Metal Knuckles is a shinier, faster version of Knuckles who can also glide, and he's just really damn cool. Sadly, he wouldn't appear again until, of all things, the Sonic and Minecraft collaboration in 2021. Then there's Tails Doll, completing the robotic doppelganger set, but trading in the sleek android aesthetic for something out of a haunted Build-A-Bear. He can float infinitely by holding the jump button, and is the only racer that can cross water with no speed loss whatsoever. And thanks to his uncanny look, he became the subject of countless memes and creepypastas because, well, I mean, just look at him. Notably, these 2 characters were designed by Sonic Team newcomer Yuji Uekawa, who would go on to become the lead character designer and artist for the franchise moving forward, including the character's major redesigns for Sonic Adventure. And then of course there's Super Sonic, the secret 10th character. He's unlocked by collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, of which there are 1 or 2 per course, each hidden behind gates that require at least 50 rings to open. Once collected, you have to win the race or else the emerald is lost. Super Sonic is unsurprisingly the best racer in the game, almost double Sonic's top speed and jump height, can run across water, and doesn't need vehicles or gimmicks to dominate. He loses the spin dash and is harder to control, but otherwise he's a straight-up upgrade. Gotta say, it is an interesting choice for a racing game to include a character who's just flat-out better than everyone else, but hey, at least it's lore accurate. As for the racetracks, well, this is where things start to feel a bit thin. For some perspective, let's look at other big-name mascot racers from around the same time. Mario Kart 64 had 16 tracks, Diddy Kong Racing had 20, and Crash Team Racing would later boast a whopping 40. Sonic R has 5. Now, in fairness, Sonic R does try to make those 5 tracks count. Each course, all named starting with the letter R naturally, is designed more like a traditional Sonic level than a conventional racetrack. Instead of narrow lanes or fixed paths, these are open maze-like stages with branching routes, shortcuts, and even some light platforming. You're still doing laps, but much like the mainline 2D Sonic games, the fastest way through a stage often isn't the most obvious. Hidden throughout the tracks are Sonic tokens and Chaos Emeralds that require ring-gated doors to access, encouraging players to take alternate paths, save up rings, and explore different routes even if they may not be the fastest ones. It's a neat concept, kind of a hybrid between platformer and racer, and a lot of the track design reflects that ambition. There are also power-ups like temporary speed boosts and familiar shields from Sonic 3, and even dash panels that fling you greater distances the more rings you're holding. So yes, Sonic R is light on quantity, but it tries to make up for it with density, with levels that are built to reward exploration just as much as straight-up racing. Outside of the main Grand Prix, there's also the expected time attack and multiplayer modes, so hey, that's at least more content than the original F-Zero had. Time attack comes in 4 flavors: standard lap runs, reverse laps, a mode where you collect 5 balloons, and another where you have to tag 4 CPU racers, which is easily the worst one. Every character has a weirdly small hitbox, and it doesn't help that on a particular course, the CPU racers can glitch out and fall through the map, becoming literally unreachable. And I don't mean once in a while. I mean this happens every single time you play that course. The game also has some balancing issues with the CPU opponents. They're predictable to a fault, often following the same paths and strategies every time. Once you get familiar with the tracks, you'll find yourself able to accurately predict which AI characters will place high or low in each race. You also can't select which opponents you face in single player. The game just auto-selects what it considers the best 4 available characters. So once you unlock even one secret character, Amy will never appear as a CPU racer ever again. But what really throws everything out of whack is the fact that Super Sonic isn't off limits. While this is typically balanced out by the CPU's wonky decision-making skills, something the instruction manual even points out, the exception to this is on the last course, Radiant Emerald. Normally, on other courses, CPU racers will largely stick to the main path, ignoring branches and shortcuts and only using ring gates if the player has already spent the rings to open them. But on the final track, CPU opponents will actively use shortcuts and ring gates regardless of whether the player has opened them or not. And so, if you're playing as Amy, who has no jump, no offensive abilities, and is the slowest racer in the game, it becomes basically impossible to win. There's no counterplay. Super Sonic will win every time, and there's nothing you can do about it. If there is one area where Sonic R holds its own, it's in the presentation, though not without a few caveats. Visually, the game fits comfortably within Sonic's established aesthetic. The environments are bright, colorful, and surprisingly detailed. There's even a little touch in Regal Ruin where the ancient hieroglyphs feature echidnas in place of Egyptians, which I thought was fun. On the technical side, Sonic R pulls off a number of impressive tricks for the Saturn, like Radiant Emerald's translucent floor and the reflective effects on the title and loading screens. And the load times are impressively short. There are occasional clipping issues, and sound effects randomly dipped out a few times, but the game does run at 30 FPS most of the time, and for a Saturn title, that's nothing to sneeze at. It is genuinely one of the better-looking 3D games on the system. Of course, all this comes with compromises. While high-quality character models were supplied by Sonic Team, Traveler's Tales had to shave down detail to keep polygon counts manageable. For instance, Tails is missing his whiskers and bangs, and Knuckles' dreadlocks were thinned and shortened. It's subtle stuff, but the cuts do start to add up, and character movement is also somewhat stiff and uninteresting. There's also the way the game exits all the way to the main menu after every race, no matter which mode you're playing, and I have to wonder if this was a weird design decision or the result of some bizarre technical quirk. And the game's short draw distance is hard to ignore. To avoid overloading the Saturn, environments are gradually drawn in using a neat transparency trick. Objects sort of melt into view instead of popping in all at once. It is a clever solution, but still not ideal. And then there's multiplayer, where the draw distance is seemingly cut in half. Suddenly, barriers and turns appear out of nowhere, and you'll find yourself crashing into walls that didn't exist a second ago. It feels like the developers were constantly walking a tightrope between graphics and performance, and in the end they had to make significant sacrifices on both sides just to stay upright. But if Sonic R is remembered for one thing and one thing only, it's the music. Richard Jacques returns to compose, and this time he brought backup: lyrics. Initially, Jacques wrote a single vocal track, Supersonic Racing, as a fun, upbeat theme. When he demoed it to Yuji Naka, the response was so positive that Naka requested every level get its own vocal song, plus one for the credits. Jacques would write all the music and lyrics himself, aiming for a kind of dance-pop vibe that would match the stages, but also stand on its own. Vocals were provided by British singer T.J. Davis, who had also joined the ABBA tribute... I can't believe I just had to Google how to pronounce ABBA. Alright. Vocals were provided by British singer T.J. Davis, who had also joined the ABBA tribute band Bjorn Again that same year. Range. Sonic Team loved the idea of an all-vocal soundtrack. Traveler's Tales, not so much. Studio head John Burton was nervous. A fully vocal soundtrack for a video game was basically unheard of at the time, and he worried that players might find it too weird or distracting. As a compromise, he added an option to disable vocals in the game's settings, with the default initially set to off. But over time, the songs grew on him. Eventually, Burton switched the default to on, deciding that the game just didn't feel right without the lyrics. The game's music even led to at least one design change. Resort Island originally took place at sunset, and this can even still be seen on the back of the box, but it was changed to midday to match the stage's lyrics. Can you feel the sunshine? And yeah, it's a polarizing soundtrack. Some people deeply love it, others enjoy it in an ironic so-bad-it's-good way, and others feel it's akin to musical waterboarding. Personally, it was an acquired taste for me, and I've gone back and forth on it over all these years. I think the instrumentation is great, the vocals are charming in a 90s pop kind of way, and the songs are undeniably catchy, for better or for worse. But hey, ask me again a week from now and maybe my opinion will have completely changed. Also, I have to ask, why all the love songs? Like, yeah, that's what people think of when they think of Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Romance. Nonetheless, the songs have endured. More than any gameplay mechanic or design quirk, it's the Sonic R soundtrack that stuck. It's become a meme, a punchline, and a genuine cult favorite. Love it or hate it, it's become a defining part of this game's identity, and arguably its most lasting contribution to the Sonic franchise. Unfortunately, the biggest thing holding Sonic R back, and the most common source of criticism, is the controls. Remember how I mentioned the game started out as a Formula 1 racer? Yeah, that DNA is still very much intact here. Even though you're controlling characters on foot, they all still handle like vehicles. Pressing left on the D-pad doesn't just turn your character left, it just sorta points them in that direction. See, the game actually expects you to use the shoulder buttons to drift like you're in a go-kart. It's deeply unintuitive. Worse still, there's no reverse button. If you hit a wall, and you will hit a wall, the only way to readjust is by slowly pivoting in place like a Roomba. I did eventually get used to it, but it never felt good. Every character, no matter how different their stats, always kinda feels like they're running on ice. And for me, there's probably nothing I hate more in a racing game than when it feels like my character can't just move in a straight fucking line. Some characters can kind of mitigate this, like Tails for instance turns more cleanly when he's flying, but at the end of the day, controlling characters like their RC cars is always going to feel just a little awkward, to say the least. And critics noticed. When Sonic R was demoed at E3 1997, the reaction was not great. One Sonic Team rep later described the public response as awful, with many players becoming frustrated with the controls and abandoning the booth as soon as their character hit a wall or fell into water. In response, John Burton tried to smooth things out, like increasing movement speed underwater, but the problems ran deeper than just a few tweaks could fix. Sega soon brought in Sonic Team veteran Hirokazu Yasuhara, the original level designer for Sonics 1, 2, and 3, to help refine the track layouts. Though Yasuhara was no longer working on Sonic games at the time, he was happy to contribute, providing intricate paper layouts for Traveler's Tales to implement. His involvement helped shape the game's unique stage design, but even his efforts couldn't fix the underlying control scheme. Meanwhile, on the production side, tensions were flaring. Katz Sato, the project lead and the liaison between Sonic Team and Traveler's Tales, had become close friends with John Burton over the course of development, even attending his wedding. But near the end of the project, Sato had a heated argument with Yuji Naka, who wanted the team to add more features to the game, things like time of day changes and weather effects. Sato pushed back, arguing that deadlines were already tight and that overloading the dev team wasn't worth it. Naka eventually relented, but the argument left such a bad taste in Sato's mouth that he asked to have his own name removed from the game's credits. When Sonic R finally released, reception was mixed. It was praised for its graphics and level design, criticized for its controls and short length, and its soundtrack, true to form, completely split the room. One outlet even said the game's short draw distance and performance issues rendered the multiplayer mode unplayable. The game saw a PC port in 1998 that fixed many of the visual hiccups. While the Saturn-specific effects like reflections and transparencies were removed, and the music and sound effects are all slightly lower quality for some reason, the PC version featured higher resolution, smoother frame rate, and improved draw distance. It even added a full 4-player split-screen mode, as opposed to the Saturn's 2-player, and included some of the features Naka had originally requested, like weather effects and time of day shifts, as well as an overhaul to the time attack modes. Sato was also properly credited in the PC version, finally giving the man his due after standing up for the developers in the face of Yuji Naka being, well, Yuji Naka. Unfortunately, Sonic R failed to fill the hole left by Sonic Extreme, and it wound up being the last Sonic game released on the Saturn. Yasuhara initially distanced himself from the game, blaming its failure on the E3 backlash and the awkward premise of driving running characters. Over time, though, he softened on it, later saying, quote, "The final version of Sonic R is actually quite good. However, I do admit that the base concept is not great." In truth, it's unlikely any single game could have reversed the Saturn's fortunes by 1997. The console had been spiraling for years, and in 1998, Sega would officially discontinue it in the West. It did continue to prove popular in Japan and would be officially sold there until 2000, but for Sega of America and Europe, Sonic R seemed like it was the final nail in the coffin. There were a lot of factors leading to the Saturn's failure, many of which simply due to poor management and decision-making from the highest rungs of the company. But if I had to hone in on one other major underlying reason, it would probably be Sega of Japan's insistence on an arcade-first mindset during a time when the industry was moving away from the arcade. Yes, Sega had a rich arcade legacy, all the way back to their very inception as a pinball manufacturer, but by the mid to late 90s, the arcade market was shrinking fast. Games on PC and console were getting longer, deeper, and more complex, and Sega's output, frankly, felt shallow in comparison. Ironically, Sega didn't even have any real competition in the arcade space at that time. I mean, it's not like Sony and Nintendo were making arcade games, and yet Sega doubled down on arcades as if that was still the future. The Saturn had its fair share of great exclusives outside of just arcade ports, but take a look at the big three of the Saturn's 1995 lineup, for instance. Virtua Cop, Virtua Fighter, and Sega Rally Championship. Not bad games, but they were games with, at most, 20-minute gameplay loops. Compare this to the PlayStation's 1995 library, which was so stacked with notable games that I made an entire video last year just to talk about how insanely stacked it was. It's also worth mentioning that a good chunk of Sega's consumer base at the time were arcade enthusiasts. And so when the arcade scene began to dwindle, so did much of Sega's market. Choosing to ignore the industry's growing lead toward the home console market meant Sega was in a prize fight with one arm tied behind their back. And they were the ones who tied it. And here's the part where I drop the sad news. This is likely the last time I'll be covering a Sega Saturn game in depth in this series. The Saturn, quite simply, didn't have much of a presence past 1997, at least not outside of Japan. And while I would love to talk about Deep Fear, the final Saturn game released in Europe, or dig into some of the wild Japanese exclusives, Saturn imports are unfortunately just out of my wheelhouse due to a number of different factors. I really did try, though, you guys. I'm genuinely sorry I couldn't make it happen. So this is a bit of a weird moment. We're saying goodbye to the Saturn while it feels like the PlayStation and N64 are barely getting started. Many of their most iconic and influential titles are still to come throughout 1998 and 1999. But in a way, that's exactly what this series was meant to capture. Not just the games themselves, but a way to relive the ups and downs of the industry in a microcosm of hindsight. If it feels like we're leaving the Saturn behind far too soon, It's only because the Saturn left us far too soon.